Hi everyone, thanks for joining me here on JKD Handmade. For this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to work a hidden seam on your raglan sweaters. Now this is a follow-up from that basic raglan sweater tutorial that I had uploaded a few weeks back. I assume that you've watched it. If you haven't, please do, because I will be sharing raglan patterns where I will not repeat the things that I've already mentioned in that video. And that is the basic things. Like most of my raglans are just worked that way. It would be the stitch pattern or so that would change. Now, just one thing with regard to that pattern, that sizing chart that I had shared, I shared it wholeheartedly with the sole purpose of teaching. All I ask is that it not be shared as your own for sale or be sold in any way. I know that these things do happen, and actually I was naive because it was something that was brought to my attention. I hadn't thought of it. But yeah, I asked that please don't sell it as your own. This belongs to JKD Handmade, and I do have this up on my Etsy shop. I've got the one here with the basic raglan, and let me just explain a basic raglan. A basic raglan is one with the seam running down the back. So you're working the back, then you're working half the back, you're working the sleeve, the front, the sleeve on the side, and then you work half the back to complete that raglan pattern. And thereafter you work down the yoke, down the body, and you reattach for the sleeves. Now for a hidden seam, it's different because here you're working at a corner. A raglan has got 4 corners and you're working at one of those corners, and generally it's at the sleeve corner in between the body and the sleeve. So for a raglan with a hidden seam, you're working the sleeve, then you work the front body, you work the sleeve, and you work a full back until you get back to that starting point. Okay, so coming back to my sizing chart, because this is a continuation of that pattern, I'll be using the same sizing chart to work a raglan with the hidden seam, and I will show you how to go about doing that. Here's my sizing chart, and I have shared it already in that basic tutorial. If you take your sizing chart, now here, the number right at the top, these numbers in bold right at the top, you already know that that is the number of rounds of ribbing that you've worked. So here it is. This is the number of rounds of ribbing that you've worked. So that must be the same as the number right on top. Any one that you're looking for, it all depends on the size that you're working. Now for this one, just as an example, I'm using the first sizing here on this chart. So I've worked 52 rounds of ribbing, and then I worked 52 stitches, single crochets around the ribbing after I had joined my ribbing. So that's that 52 right at the top. Now when separating the yoke for a hidden seam, you will assume that this starting point is your first number on that sizing chart. So here I've got it as the 9th stitch. So I'm going to assume that this is my 9th stitch, and I will count from there. So then it's 9, 10, then 2, 4, 6, 8. So this is my 18th stitch. So remember, that's 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. Here's the 18 on my chart. And then it's the 35th stitch. So that's 18, 20, 2, 4, 6, 8, 30, 2, 4, and 5. 35. So that's my 35th stitch, which is the 3rd number on my chart. And then my last number is the 44th stitch. So from 35, 36, that's 38, 40 to 4, 44. So here it is, and I've marked that off. So here's my 44th stitch. I've got 3 stitch markers in place, and most of the time I find that I only need 3 stitch markers because my 4th stitch marker would be placed right at the starting point. Now, to make sure that it's right, that you've calculated it correctly here, or rather marked off your stitch markers correctly, you can go ahead and count from 44 to 52 to make sure, just to check on it. So that was my 44, 46, 48, 50, and then it's 52. So here, if I count my remaining stitches, I should end up with my 9th stitch back on this starting point, and that's this one here. So it's 2, 4, 6, 8, and here's my 9th stitch. So that works out, and I've got it all marked off. So I hope that makes sense, but it's just, remember, you're counting from your first stitch at start. So your first stitch will always be, if you're working the first one like I am, then it's the 9th. So it will always count as your first stitch. Your start will always count as your first stitch, and then you'll mark off your 2nd, your 3rd, and your 4th. We'll now work round 2. Here on after, it is a 1 round repeat for the rest of the yoke. So you will be repeating round 2 until you complete your yoke. Now it's turn. I always choose to turn after every round. You already know from my basic pattern that turning helps to keep the seam straight. And whether I'm working a hidden seam or the basic raglan, I still turn after every round. Then it's chain 2. Chain 2 counts as our first stitch, and you'll continue on with your stitches until you get to your corners. At those corners, you'll work a V-stitch, which is a double crochet, or whatever stitch you're using, a chain 1 and a double crochet, just as I had done for that basic pattern. So I'm going to skip ahead until I get to that last stitch where I can show you what to do next, because I assume that you've already watched the basic tutorial and you know how to work your corners. Here I am at the end of round 2. I've worked my corners into those corners that are marked off, and I've worked my stitches in between. So to end the round, into that same stitch from where our chain 2 comes out of, right at the bottom, you will work a double crochet, then it's a chain 1, and you can slip stitch into the 2nd chain from chain 2 to join. Now round 3, turn, slip stitch into that chain 1 space. You will always work your first stitch into the chain 1 space. So then it's a chain 2 counting as my first stitch, and it's worked into that chain 1 space. This is my first corner that we've worked. So then you'll continue on with your stitches for this round, and you'll work your corners into the chain 1 spaces that are marked off as corners until you get back to this starting point right here. I've worked my way to the end of round 3. So here I've worked my corners into those corners, and I've worked my stitches in between. Right at the end, please do not forget to work your last stitch into this last stitch that makes up the V stitch from our previous round. So here it is. That is your last stitch. Then you'll work, remember we're starting off with a V-stitch. So we've got to complete the stitch as a V-stitch, and that is our first corner. So you'll work a double crochet into that chain space, then it's a chain 1, and into your second chain from chain 2, slip stitch to join. Now this is the pattern. You will go ahead and repeat this round. So if I turn again, and then now I'm working round 4 again, just as I had done for my last round, I'll slip stitch into that first chain 1 space, then it's a chain 2 counting as my first stitch. I'll work my stitches all around. I'll work those corners into my corners that are marked off until I get back to the end, where making certain not to forget my last stitch into the stitch right here, and then it's a double crochet or a stitch into that chain space, my first corner, and it's a chain 1 and a slip stitch to join. So I will work my way all around to that end so I can show you once again, and thereon after you are repeating that round to complete your yoke. I've continued on with round 4. I've worked those corners into my allocated corners, and I've worked stitches in between. So here I am at the end. I've also made certain to work my last stitch into that last stitch that makes up the V-stitch from my previous round. So then to end the round, it's a stitch into that chain 1 space, then it's a chain 1, slip stitch into the second chain from chain 2 to join, and here we formed our corner right at the start. So if you look at it here, here's our 4 corners that make up the raglan. So here's it. That's the first corner, second, third, and the 4th. So you'll repeat this round until your yoke measures the armhole depth. Now once you've continued on with your raglan and you've measured the armhole depth for the size that you are working according to the way I explained in that video for the basic raglan, so your armhole depth is right for the size that you're working, we need to join these corners so that we can have our body here and then we can have our sleeves there. So you'll see that when I fold this yoke in half, and here's my starting point, it's right at that corner. If I fold it in half, so it's corner to corner meeting there, and on the other side it's the corner to corner meeting there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to slip stitch into that chain space, and then I'll chain 2. Chain 2 counts as my first stitch, and then I'll chain whatever chain I need to chain, be it a chain 3, chain 4, chain 5, and so on. I've already explained this in that other video. So then I'll just chain my chain 3, and then I'll skip the stitches in between because this is my sleeve, so it's going to be an opening for my armholes, and then into that chain space on the opposite side I'll work my stitch, and then I'll continue on with my stitches until I get to my next stitch marker on this side here. I've worked my way to that next corner right here. Into that chain space I'll work my stitch, then it's a chain 3, so you'll have as many chains here as you chained on this side, excluding that chain 2 from the side because the chain 2 counted as our first stitch. And then I'll skip the stitches in between and I'll join to my last stitch marker with a stitch into that chain space. Then I'll continue on with my stitches to the end. So here I've formed my armhole spaces on either side. I've worked my way to the end of this round. So right at the end here, I've worked a stitch into that double crochet that makes up my V-stitch from the previous round. And then to end the round, it's into that second chain from chain 2 slip stitch to join. So now we've got our starting point worked right at the side of the raglan. So you'll continue on for the next round. It's chain 2, turn, and continue on with working around this body, just as I had explained in that basic raglan tutorial. If you find that you want to work right here in the center of that chain, you can always slip stitch to the center and then go back and work your stitches. So you can slip stitch once or twice to get to that center, and then it will be chain 2. Chain 2 counts as your first stitch, turn, and then now you're working your stitches all the way around. So this way you brought your seam to the center or right at the underarm of your raglan. So you're going to work your way all the way around, and here you'll come join again. I've already explained all of this in that basic tutorial. So here on out, it's the same as that basic tutorial. And as I said, please do watch my tutorial for the basic raglan, where I explain everything in detail. This tutorial I made just to show you how to work that hidden seam on your raglans. And another thing is, I've got my pattern up on Etsy, and up on Etsy I've got 2 charts. One is with the basic raglan with the seam at the back, and the other is with the hidden seam. But the thing that I like about this tutorial is that you can take this method and use it for other patterns, your favorite patterns that are of a basic raglan with the starting point that runs, or the seam that runs down the back. If the stitch pattern allows you to use this method, then why not? So there's so many options. I'm just giving you a basic idea of how to work a hidden seam. And that's it for this tutorial. So just one other thing, if you are new to my channel, I share basic tutorials for beginners, and then I also share intermediate patterns as well. Look out for my continuation on my raglans, where I'll be sharing different stitch patterns, and I am certain that you would not want to miss out on those. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.